an invitation for public comment. If anyone wishes to address the board, now is your opportunity. Please approach the table or weigh in on one. Going one. Twice. Three times saying no one. We'll move on to the next item. The request for proposal for independent actuaries on the actuarial analysis of the Dallas Police and Fire Pension System is required by section 2.025, article 6243A1 of Vernon's Texas Civil Statute. And I'd like to invite Ms. Ernestine and David P. to present on this item, please. While they're making their way up here, I would like to express my gratitude and that of the entire board to the parent team for your work in running this procurement, making sure we have a solid process. My understanding this has gone very well. We could not have done this without your knowledge and expertise. We're very glad you're here. First procurement, extension people is done. And who will go first? Saracen, the item.
Absolutely. Yes, good morning, Chair members. Mayor Ernestine, General Counsel. I'm presenting on item 5, the request for proposal for independent actuary for the Dallas Police Fire Pension System, or DPFP, and I'm co-presenting today this year actuary. First, a summary of the presentation. Sorry. The goal for this presentation is to provide an update on the selection of an independent actuary for the Dallas Police and Fire System. I presented on the procurement at the June board meeting, and we have an update today on the recommendation for selection. This procurement process has been a bit unusual because the PRB, as a state agency, is carrying out the selection of a contractor for a public retirement system, which is responsible for actually ensuring the contracts. Shortly, we'll discuss the recommendation for selection, but I do want to be mindful that the system still needs to carry out the negotiation with the selected actuary once the final selection is made, and this is still very much an ongoing active program. So I want to be sure that we are sensitive to the fact that negotiation is not yet done. We'll discuss an amendment to the memorandum of understanding, or MOU, between the PRB and the system. And then David will provide an update on the selection process and recommendation. And finally, I'll provide an overview of next steps. Next slide. First, the amendments to MOU. Based on feedback from Chair Lively at the June meeting, we executed an amendment to the MOU that extends it through the end of the next legislative session. We anticipate that the actuarial review and the findings may result in legislation affecting the system in the 89th session. So the agreement formalizes our collaboration for our reporting requirement leading up to the 89th and any related bills filed throughout session. Of course, we routinely work with systems throughout the legislative session as well as legislators and legislative agencies, but we thought it to include these roles. So I'll turn it over to David now to walk through the next slide.
That would be next slide, please.
They were there.
There we go.
So we received 2 proposals. The committee members read and scored the proposals independently. And each of the 3 independent scores favored Chiron over the second respondent. The committee determined together that respondent reviews were not needed. Our committee recommendation is based on the strength of the proposal, the understanding of the work contemplated, the qualifications of the firm and the proposed team, and the experience with Texas pension system. For our qualifications, both firms were well qualified. But when it came to experience with Texas pension system, the lead actuary for Chiron worked many years for an Austin firm and currently is the lead actuary for Austin system. And the other respondent really had very little Texas experience and none ongoing, just some of the past. And when it came to the strength of the proposal, We thought that the Chiron approach was a well thought out approach. The fixed fee included some modeler, and we believe that modeler would allow the system to make changes on the fly. So if the actuary comes up with some suggested changes to contributions and benefits, and the system decides, well, what if instead of A, B, and C, we try, X, Y, and Z? This approach will allow the actuary to model those on the fly. And we believe that approach, since that model is included in the fixed fee, will minimize any additional time and expense. And so it gives high visibility into the overall. So based on all those.
David, Mr. Mayor, can I just ask you guys to, when you're speaking, to have your mics a little bit closer, because it seems like folks on Zoom are having trouble hearing.
So for all those reasons, Chiron was.
Thank you. Questions from the committee, selection of Chiron, criteria used, questions for David. Ms. Lively, please.
Thank you. I think you had said that the committee determined that interviews with each of the companies were not required. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit and explain why that determination was made?
These were very detailed proposals. They range from 30 to 60 pages each. And we believe that everything that we needed to know was included in the proposals, and we did not have any additional questions.
And I'll just add that in the RFP and noted that interviews were optional, so we wanted to leave that option in case the selection could be determined that they were needed, but they felt that they had information to just more fairly without the additional verification from either side.
Other questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to recommend the executive director, PRB, finalized selection of Chiron as recommended by the selection committee, pending approval, final approval for chair as authorized at June board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. I also want to express my appreciation to the selection committee. For me, served as chair. Adam Dush served on the selection committee. Ryan Vernon, thank you very much. Took time to read 30 to 60 pages of these submittals. I also want to thank Executive Director Kelly Goshaw and your assistant. Thank you very much. Please pass on our gratitude to your team. You all have been great to work with the pension report and your system. Thank you. Is there anything else we have on this side?
I can present our next steps if y'all would like.
Please.
Okay, all right, here's our last slide. So, following this meeting for our MOU with the system, we plan to make the final selection by Monday, July 31st. That will be in the form of a letter signed by Chair Biden and Executive Director Jonah. We'll provide selection letters to the system, and negotiations will begin at that time. Generally, the PRB doesn't have a role in that negotiation process, but for the MOU, we may review the contract to ensure it complies with the statutory requirements. Once the contract is negotiated, the first phase of work, which is based on the 2022 actuarial evaluation, will begin, and the estimated completion date is October 2023, and the actuary will report to the system board on its review and recommendations on November 9th. And then begin the second phase of work once the 2023 AD is ready. That work is anticipated to be completed in February 2024 and presented to the system board on February 8th, 2024. The PRB may invite the system or the independent actuary to provide updates at future board meetings in order to stay engaged on this issue heading into the next legislative session. And the PRB is required to submit a report to the legislature by December 1, 2024. So staff will keep the board and committee updated on our progress. And that concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments about this? Thank you very much. On to item 6, preliminary summary of systems authorized under the Texas Government Code Chapter 810 that offer 100% lump sum option. And Mr. Fee, you have it.
I'm David P. The staff actuary who is our preliminary research on district and supplemental plan long term assumption. So part of the PRB mandate is that we ensure equitable distribution of benefits. But when one system was contemplating plan termination, they began offering lump sums. And we took notice that the assumption used for applicate arguably shortchanging their retirees. So we assembled a list of systems that offer such lump sums and tabulated their assumption. So we'll go over the methodology we use to populate these plans. A list of systems that offer complete cash outs, the basis of actual equivalence. And then for each of these special district plans, we'll look at the assumptions used to calculate the lump sum, the assumptions used to value liabilities, and then we'll look at those lump sum and valuation assumptions side by side. And lastly, we'll look at a sample lump sum calculation that will show us the effect these assumptions have on the effective benefits. That will go over the next steps. So for methodology, we reviewed the latest plan documents we had on the file for each of these plans. Now, the reason we call this preliminary is we have not confirmed these plan documents are the most recently available, only that it's most recently out on file. And to that point, overnight system let us know that they did have updated assumptions compared to what was showing on this list. And it happened to be the system that was showing the most updated mortality table already in here, so it's not surprising that the ones that updated.
Mr. P, can you please speak closer to them? Thank you.
So we identified the key plan provisions for each document. When the lump sums offered, what interest rate is used to calculate the lump sums, and what mortality table is used to calculate the lump sums. So these are the systems that offer complete catch-ups. There are 12 out of the 34 district and supplemental plans that offer full lump sum options at termination, and 11 of those plans also offer full lump sum options at retirement. Now, these include very large employers. CPS Energy has 2,900 employees, and based on past experience, 100% of terminating employees are expected to elect that lump sum. Tarrant County Hospital District has 4,000 active employees, and 65% of the terminating employees and 35% of the retiring employees are expected to take that lump sum. University Health has 7,000 active employees, and 25% of them are expected to take the lump sum.
Where is the University Health System located? Is that Dallas?
So that's San Antonio, it's the Bear County Hospital.
Thank you.
And then lastly, on a side note, this analysis is focused on the 10 plans solely, but it is possible there are municipal plans affected as well, as we have a plan document suggesting the Dallas CRF now for these same lump sums. So now we'll go over the basics of actual equivalence. So at retirement, employees are offered a choice between various optional forms. And the actual equivalence refers to how the system calculates those various optional forms. And the idea is that a system should not care what option is selected because they're all equal in value. Now, the point I would make is that corporate plans have mandated lump sum assumptions. The IRS mandates updated mortality assumptions and updated corporate bond rates to calculate lump sums for corporate plans. But our Texas public pension plans have no such mandate. So when we're looking at actual equivalence, there are two components. There's an interest rate and a mortality table. The interest rate works just like a mortgage. So if you have $3,000 to put toward buying a house, if interest rates are low, you're going to be able to afford a much more expensive house than if interest rates are high. Now, on the same token, if you have earned a $3,000 annuity from your employer, if that employer uses a low interest rate to calculate your lump sum, it's going to end up a much higher value than if they use a high interest rate. When we look at the mortality table, in general, the more recent mortality table is going to reflect a longer expected lifetime, and that longer expected lifetime will generate a higher lump sum value. So lump sum calculated as the equivalent of 20 years of payments is going to be larger than if it's equivalent of expected 15 years of payments. So if you think about a 2010 table, it's likely to produce a much larger lump sum than 1984 table. So here we have the actual equivalence that's currently being used for lump sums based on what we have. So when an annuity is converted to a lump sum, the actual equivalence says You as the retiree can recreate the annuity with the lump sum based on the assumptions. So looking at the top, Citizens Medical Center. Citizens Medical Center, based on what we have on file, is saying you as the retiree should expect to earn 8% and live only as long as folks did in 1984. And as long as those hold true, this lump sum will be equivalent. But according to statistics available on the Social Security Administration website, a 55-year-old man can expect to live 15 years in 1990, but 18 years in 2018. That's a 20% increase in that time period. So the annuity value increased by that 20% over that time period. But if the lump sum assumptions were not updated, then the lump sum value did not increase accordingly. And lastly, I point out that LCRA, we're showing as the most updated mortality table on this slide that is the 2000 RP unisex. They were the one that told us overnight that they have since updated it even further. So we will update that accordingly when we do our next steps.
Ask a question, please. Citizens Medical Center. They're using an interest rate of 8%. You show on such provider, that's why they're very such 7%. The higher rate there result in a smaller lump sum combined with a mortality table that's out of date. So retirees who elect the lump sum are sort of getting shorted in 2 ways. Do you agree with that?
Yes, both the interest rate and the mortality table individually are shortchanging, and then when you combine it, it's just a larger.
Thank you.
I guess at this point, Chair.
Please.
So we're operating in a situation where there aren't rules. And I think this is an area where actuaries feel that we have to speak up only because we recognize this is a complex calculation. You know, for an actuary, it's easy, you know, it's interest and mortality, you know how to do plans. But when an employee is asked to make a choice, the lump sum, especially for people who have mortgages and kids in college and things they want to do in retirement, a lump sum can be very attractive, but they may not really comprehend the relative value between, you know, a lifetime annuity that perhaps even would insure their spouse after their death, versus the lump sum. And, you know, a lump sum is a great option to have, you know, because some people can really benefit from it. But again, because in the public sector, there is no requirement to really explain the relative values of the 2 options. We're in a situation here where I think, you know, David bringing this, at least to these plans' attention, and he's, in some ways, what they're doing appears to be legal. And you know, they may be doing it intentionally. On the other hand, you know, again, this is a complex mathematical calculation, and perhaps we just need to bring their attention to it, and they may wish to make some changes. In the private sector, there are lots of requirements regarding either the calculation of the lump sum and also explaining to a participant what the values are, the relative values. And since that's not the case here, and we don't really know how the various plans are communicating, I think it's really a good idea that David kind of brings this up, since he recognized this in dealing with one of the plans that is in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the comments. I appreciate that, Ms. Josh. You refer to the private sector, your comments, and did I hear you to refer to ERISA?
I didn't directly refer to it, so I was indirectly referring to it.
And ERISA governs this for private plans.
Yes.
Can you briefly summarize for us what ERISA says with regard to lump sum cash outs every time?
For actual loans in general, ERISA just says you need to use reasonable assumption, but it doesn't today. It doesn't define what reasonable means. But Section 417 governs lump sums in particular, and IRS in Section 417 made a very specific mortality table that's updated every year, and updated corporate bond rates that are updated at each period, so. We just don't have anything similar for our Texas public pension system, there's no requirements at all.
The law is silent on this, that's what you're saying.
Right.
Would the professional actuarial requirement that assumptions and methods be considered with one another be in play here?
It's hard with no. In my opinion, some of these assumptions are not reasonable, and they should be updated. But there's no legal requirements that I know of that would force them to do so.
Our ASOP's actuarial standards practice really govern calculating contributions, calculating how we present things for financial purposes, values of the plan. So I don't think our standards practice necessarily address something like this. But I think our mandate on the, what the mission of the Texas Pension Review Board is, I think does include at least speaking up on this. Now, the other thing to remember is, I think David made a comment that when you're discounting future payments at 8%, that the, in a way, the participants should be able, should think that they should be able to go out and invest in that way and earn 8%. Well, everybody knows that, if you bought an annuity right now, it would probably be in the 3% range. So there's no way that a participant could replicate at any of these interest rates, 7-8% could replicate the value, with an annuity right now. But there's the other issue of if the plan is going to offer a lump sum, what is the equivalent value to the pension fund? And again, that's using the valuation interest rate, where they're presuming to earn, some better interest because of pooled assets and better investment knowledge. And there are so many things to think about when you're talking about lump sums. You can also presume that there's some anti-selection, perhaps people who do not feel that they're going to live a natural lifetime, may select a lump sum more often than somebody who feels that they're extraordinarily healthy. So there are lots of things to think about in designing a lump sum. But again, when you're using tables that are 20 years out of date and really high interest rates, it is just something that we feel like probably should point it out to these plans and see if they understand the implications.
Yeah, I agree. I think transparency is vital here, not only to plan participants, especially the plan participants, but also to the board and also to policymakers. The idea of the pension is an assured source of income for life. And this plan design feature is basically frustrating thing. Anybody who cashes out is giving up that gem unless they go and buy an annuity, which does not make sense. They're giving up that assured source of income. I'll share a couple of quick anecdotes if I might. Until 2002, all state and local employees in the state of Nebraska had only a defined contribution. And despite years of efforts by the state retirement plan in Nebraska to educate plan participants, otherwise, a significant portion of retirees in those plans were capped down. They had an annuity option, they chose not to take it. And so as of 2003, Nebraska switched those workers to a cash out plan. In the last 5 years or so, the states of Missouri and Illinois have passed legislation that was approved that provided a cash out to non-retired, either inactive participants or those who were within striking distance of retirement. And they were offering the cash out on 60% present value basis, which basically might have created an actuarial gain. The purpose of it was not to promote retirement security for the plan participants, but rather to create an actuarial gain for the time system. The results they've had have been sort of negligible from a materiality standpoint. they have generated some gains. Those who cash out are taking a fraction of what the long-term value of the actual annuity should have been. And I'm concerned in these cases that same phenomenon might be going on. It's just human nature. Numerous studies have supported this. And when somebody sees a 5 or 6 figure value associated with their name, they will often take that money and think that they can manage it themselves and move on for the rest of their lives. And in many cases, that does not work out as well. So for those reasons noted, I think this is a very important issue to the sport. And I'm hoping that we will continue to look at this and find more information.
Chairman, if I could offer one other thought.
Please.
As an actuary, I personally share your concerns. However, when I was very young in my consulting career, I had a client who kind of took me to task on those kinds of comments, and which is, you know, first of all, you cannot assume that people do not know how to manage their money. And that, you know, there are lots of middle class people who, you know, pay their mortgages, buy a boat, have cars, put their kids through college, and have very good financial ability. And so, you know, to say that a lump sum is never appropriate or whatever, it is, you know, not appropriate. And so, it was a reminder to me that you can't always anticipate what's going to happen. But I do have an extreme concern that very few people have the financial background to manage a large sum of money. And again, I share your concerns, but I also have been told and not to just presume that people can't.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments.
I have a couple of comments. So I think I share concerns as it relates to outdated mortality tables, right? I know I should be using a 1984 mortality table. But at the same time, I want to tread carefully because it is a complex mathematical formula that we're not laying ourselves down a line where we're telling people how this has to be calculated. I think from a personal perspective, where I would like to see it go is just transparency, right? If the systems can get to a place where they're at least telling plan participants, this is your lump sum calculation, this is how it was calculated, this is the amount, if you stay in, this is the amount that you can expect to receive, assuming you live until X years of age. So that people make informed decisions when the information is presented to them, as opposed to just having, a dollar amount presented. I think it's a difficult subject, right? It has financial implications both for the plans and for the individuals. And I just think that it's something that we have to be very intentional about, so that we don't overstep and tell people how they should be operating their plan or calculating amounts. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're not a policy making body, so we can't really tell them, but and I wouldn't aim to confirm my decision on this. But I agree with you, understand on the transparency issue. I think we have to understand if there's an opportunity to nudge plans or policymakers or participants in a more positive direction. I think we ought to be able to do that. Do you have more to present, Mr. P?
I do, so we can move on to the next slide. So these are the actuarial valuation assumptions for the same. So the actuarial valuation assumption should be using the system best estimate of future gains. So that best estimate seems to call for below 7% returns and the updated expected lifespan. So we'll move on to the next couple of slides where we're going to compare the rates side by side between the valuation and the lump sum and mortality sides.
May I stop you 1 moment? Is PUBG 2010 the latest? Would that be considered the latest mortality assumption?
That's probably the latest that specifically was designed for public employees. It was only used public employees, and there's specific ones for safety officers, teachers, and then general public employees. But the other one would be this private plans 2012 table. So they're both around the same time, but there were two most recent standard widely accepted mortality tables. I would say roughly every decade we get a new widely accepted mortality table.
Thank you.
So here we see the comparison of the interest rates, with the left column being the best estimate used in evaluation, and the right being what they're actually using to calculate the sum. In all but 3 instances, the system's best estimate of the professionally managed portfolio's returns was less than what they assumed a retiree could earn on their own. And those 3 exceptions were Colorado River, Houston MTA, and Supplemental. And then based on what we heard overnight, we would add LCRA to that list.
What did you say LCRA is?
I don't remember specifically, I just know that they did say that they believe that for several years, the valuation interest rate has been higher than some rate.
Thank you.
And so here on the next slide, we have the mortality table side by side. So the left column is what's used in evaluation, that's their best expectation. And then the right side is what's used in the lump sum. So starting at the top, it says in medical term, using the private retirement plans 2012 table, their best estimate calls for an expected lifespan of 21 years. But when they actually calculate lump sums using the unisex pension 1984 table, the expected lifetime is 15 years. So their best estimate is 40% higher than what they're using to calculate lump sums. So on the next slide, we can see the average effect these assumptions have. 7.9% is the average lump sum interest rate for the system using that UP84 mortality. 6.62% is the average valuation interest rate. So in that top table, calculations of age 65 retirement, using that UP84 table and that average 7.9% rate, a $3,000 monthly annuity results in under a $300,000 lump sum. But with that updated 2010 mortality table, and the interest rate they're using in there, the average interest rate they're using in their evaluation, that $3,000 monthly annuity is worth over $400,000. That's over a 33% increase. And so in the actual evaluation, if the actuary is modeling the employee to elect a lump sum, that liability is $300,000. But if that actuary is modeling the employee to elect an annuity, that liability is $400,000. And it's more severe if we look at a terminating employee at age 45. So there, the actual lump sum is coming in under $9,000 for a $500 annuity, whereas using updated assumptions, it would be over double. As a reminder, part of our mandate is to ensure equitable distribution of benefits. And in my opinion, these benefits would not be considered equitable. And lastly, I point out that ideally, an employer should not care what option a retiree makes. But in this case, one option costs the employer $400,000, and in another option, it costs the employer $300,000. So though we have no reason to believe it's happening, it's not ideal for an employer to have an incentive to sway an employee to take one option over another. But that's the situation we have.
And that's what you commented about the statement, what was happening.
Right? I do it fresh.
So lastly, I'll go over next steps. Again, we use the plan documents we have on file, but we do plan to go back and communicate with each of the systems and make sure that we have the most recent plan documents available and explain this issue to them in response. And then we will also publish something on our website with all the results.
Thank you. Other questions, Mr. P, comments?
I think my only comment is before the plans or the findings are published on the website, you can just have a recognition from the whole board.
I'm with that. I'd like to suggest a couple of things as next steps as well. One, it would be helpful for me to know whether any of these plans are non-security participating. If for those plans that are non-social security and they help provide a lump sum option, basically those workers who study a career, those employers are having no sort of accounting. I think we would know that. Also, it would be helpful for me to know the take-up rate. What percentage of those who are quitting and what percentage of those who are retiring are affecting the side. A related issue, perhaps slightly outside of this issue of this subject, is that required communication with client participants. And that's come up before on this dais, and it's something that I hope will come up again. And that is, I think that client participants in Texas public pension plans ought to have much more information than they currently are receiving, at least according to state law. I mean, some plans out there that do a good job. There's no there's no adequate minimum requirement for plans that the information that these client participants are getting. And this is a perfect example, I think, of an opportunity for a client to educate their participants. In the case that you showed here a couple of slides ago for somebody who's choosing to retire with a lump sum, and they're going to be given a finder's duty correctly, they're going to get $296,000 rather than $405,000. And so if we could look at those factors, so period participation, the take-up rate for each of these plans. I'm interested also in the status of the Dallas plan, which you mentioned might be in play here. And also, let's all keep in mind this and related issues with regard to communication standards for public pension plans.
Along those lines, in the state of Texas, for these plans, is there a requirement, is there a spousal sign-off requirement for if a member chooses a non-spouse annuity?
I think that may actually be required.
Okay, and if you could verify that, so if somebody's taking a lump sum, has the spouse signed off on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Other comments, questions? Is that the end of your preparing remarks, Mr. P?
That is the end.
Thank you very much. We're not scheduled for action on this, so we'll move on to the next item, which is future meetings. Next actuarial committee meeting is TBD, but we do know it will be in this room. So, next board meeting will be September 21. All right. If there's no further business and no objection, I would move to adjourn this meeting.
Chair Brainerd, one comment, and again, based on the work with Dallas Police and Fire, could we have, could we actually say that we're going to get an update from the independent actuary after they've completed the first part of their study instead of that in this actual meeting? Presumably that would be after October of this year. Or would that go to the full board?
I think we haven't, so in MOU, it has a general provision saying that we may invite them to come and update the board or committees. It was general, so it could be either or both. So we can work with them to determine what the best timeline is. It could be either.
But it would be, I think it would be nice to hear after this first round of their study, if they could have a milestone in October. It would be nice to get a presentation soon.
I will work with them.
Okay. I agree with that. See if we can have on that. Anything else? Thank you. I move to adjourn this meeting. I guess that's.
Second.
Thank you.